You didn't hear from me, but the men are fighting again, and Donnie's having another narcissistic meltdown so large that it is on the verge of propelling us into a global war on purpose. You read that correctly. I think that entering into that war would be more intentionally added chaos to try and distract us. But before I dive into that, make sure that you like, comment, and share to get the word out, and follow along to stay up to date on the news. All right, let's dive into it. For starters, we know Donnie's had a very rough couple of weeks. It very much so bruised his narcissistic ego. He had his fallout with Elon, a bunch of other stuff, the taco situation, that public fight with Gavin Newsom, where he got totally dunked on. So he is desperate for a win. He's spiraling. He's looking for some form of control. So he has his giant birthday military parade, which we already covered the disaster that was. Go check it out. And on top of that, the No King's Day that absolutely blew his parades out of the water in attendance. This man has taken loss after loss, and he is at a very dangerous boiling point. And over the last few days, apparently he's been taking it out on his own staff internally. Apparently he was so unhappy over his failure of a parade that he blamed his defense secretary, Pete Hegseth. He wanted something that was menacing, and instead they gave him a festive parade. Talk about schmictator behavior, but apparently he's especially angry at the soldiers. Apparently they were having too much fun. And apparently he really let Pete Hegseth have it over the phone, which I'm sure he's familiar with because he's been divorced multiple times. They're all about that sanctity of marriage, though, am I right? But he just kept repeating that the tone was the problem. The tone was off. Everyone was happy and celebrating, and apparently he wanted fear and power. Allegedly, Donnie was the one who told the director of communications to tweet out that there were 250,000 people in attendance, even though they knew there was only maybe 40. And then he publicly went on to disrespect his own director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and in his many Truth Social rants, he started crying about the president of France. Which brings us up to this news that I'll let you pause to read, that I'm sure we've all already heard of, and puts us in a very dangerous situation because we are being led by a narcissist who has lost every single fight for the last however many weeks, and he's desperate for a win. He left the G7 summit early, claiming that he wasn't going to work on a ceasefire, but he was working on something much bigger than that, an end, a real end, not a ceasefire. That's a concerning sentence. He's also claiming they know a bunch of other information that I'm going to take a wild guess and say they probably don't actually know. Here's where I think we're going to run into a real problem. He is desperate for a win, and he's trying to call for an unconditional ceasefire via intimidation tactics. Because he doesn't realize that the United States has lost all credibility, and now we're just a public joke. It seems unlikely that they'll listen to him, and what's the next step there? He gets angry and sends us to war. And a global war would be the perfect thing for them to flood the news with to distract from all the chaos they're trying to invoke here inside the United States right now. And that's a big concern as well.